chill settled over the Virginia cemetery as Jordan's car rolled onto the gravel drive, the low-hanging mist curling around the rows of headstones like silent sentinels in a world paused between breath and heartbeat. It was a Saturday morning, but the day felt suspended in time. The sun struggled to break through heavy gray clouds, and even the usual chirp of birds overhead seemed muffled beneath the weight of his grief. Jordan sat for a moment behind the wheel, his fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel as he stared at the tombstones, each bearing witness to lives gone by, and to the grave he had come to tend each week since the fateful day. Exactly 1 month ago, he had watched with shattered heart as they lowered Sherry's casket into the earth, and though he had returned here every Saturday without fail, today the ache seemed sharper, the wounds of loss rawer, as if time itself refused to move forward without her. He opened the trunk and lifted the heavy metal watering can, its weight a small comfort against the emptiness in his chest, then retrieved a bundle of freshly picked flowers wrapped in green paper, her favorite color, the one she had insisted on for their nursery walls. With deliberate steps over damp grass that crackled underfoot, he followed the narrow path between weathered stones, each bearing a name and a story he would never know until he reached Sherry's resting place. As he walked, memories washed over him in tidal waves, her laughter that danced like sunlight, the way her dark hair framed her face when she smiled, and the night they discovered she was with child, how she had burst into their bedroom, brandishing the positive pregnancy test like a treasured gift, her voice trembling with excitement as they stayed awake for hours, dreaming of names and cradles and the life they would share with their baby. Jordan paused at the gravesite, the grass around her marker already showing signs of stubborn growth, tiny green sprouts pushing through the cracked soil, as if life itself refused to yield entirely to death's decree. He knelt and gently brushed away the damp leaves and mist, revealing Sherry L. Williams carved into the cold granite, the letters familiar and yet somehow distant, as though they belonged to someone else's story. He poured water slowly over the soil, listening to the soft hiss as it seeped in, and then set the flowers at the headstone's base, the petals bright against the somber stone. "Hey, sweetheart," he began softly, voice thick with longing. "It's been a month since I had to say goodbye, and I miss you and our baby more than words can hold. The nursery still waits for you, that mint green compromise we laughed about when you wanted yellow and I argued for green. It sits there, untouched, as if it knows you'll come home any moment." His eyes stung with tears as he recalled the bitterness of being denied a final farewell, how he'd raced from the airport, heart pounding, only to learn her family had sealed the casket before he arrived, refusing his plea to see her one last time. The memory of that moment, the heavy lid closing, the finality of it, had haunted him ever since. "I wish I could have held you, Sherry," he whispered, fingertips tracing the faint reflection of her face in the photo affixed to the stone. "They took that from me, us, and I still don't understand why." He leaned his forehead against the cool surface as though the cold might numb the pain, and for a heartbeat, the cemetery seemed to sigh along with him, the only response the faint rustle of a breeze through distant oaks. When Jordan straightened, he noticed movement at the edge of his vision, a lone figure standing just beyond the headstone, framed by the swirling mist. She wore a flowing skirt and a light shawl, her silhouette hauntingly familiar, like a memory stepping into flesh. His breath caught in his throat as his heart thundered, hope and disbelief warring within him. "Hello!" he called, voice trembling, the single word ripping through the quiet, as if challenging the world to prove him wrong. But when the mist swirled again, the figure was gone, vanished as though she had never stood there at all. Jordan blinked, doubt and wonder colliding in his mind. Had his grief conjured a ghost, or had the cemetery itself concealed a secret waiting to be unearthed? He closed his eyes and shook his head, resolve hardening as he rose to his feet. Whether apparition or trick of light, today's sighting felt like a summons to search deeper for answers about Sherry's mysterious death, questions that clung to him like shadows. Gathering his things, Jordan allowed himself one more lingering glance at the grave, the wild grass sprouting defiantly above the casket as though promising renewal even in the face of loss. "I'll find the truth," he vowed quietly, voice lost to the mist, yet carried in its swirl across the cemetery grounds. Then, with heavy heart and determination in his steps, he turned back toward his car, leaving behind the silent rows of stones and the unspoken echoes of secrets that lay buried just beneath the surface. A thin veil of mist clung to the Virginia cemetery as Jordan lifted the empty watering can from the damp ground, its metal surface cold against his fingers. He brushed a hand through his hair and whispered, "I hope you're at peace, Sherry. I hope our little one is with you, and that both of you are watching over me somehow." He lingered a moment beside the grave, the fresh bouquet at his feet the only splash of color against the somber stone. Even a month in, the grief still felt raw, and the echo of her absence chased him in every silent corner of the grounds. As he straightened, Jordan couldn't banish the memory of that mysterious woman he'd glimpsed through the morning haze, her silhouette so uncannily like his wife's that his heart had skipped a beat. He scolded himself for letting hope sneak in alongside the sorrow. It must have been the shifting fog, a trick of light, or simply the weight of his longing warping reality. And yet, he could not shake the faintest glimmer of possibility that she might have been real, lingering to send him a sign. Clutching the empty can, he stooped to inspect the photo inset in Sherry's headstone. Time and weather had faded the image more than he'd realized. What once was vibrant now lay sun-bleached and washed out, the once clear colors reduced to ghostly outlines. A deep frown creased his forehead, preserving her memory, making sure her face remained as vivid as his love for her felt urgent suddenly. "I'll get that fixed for you, sweetheart," he murmured, making a mental note of the cemetery's nearby print shop. It wasn't far, an errand he could squeeze in before heading home. "I'll be back soon with a new photo. I love you," he whispered, then turned toward his car, each step on the damp grass heavy with resolve. The drive to the print shop gave him time to replay every image of Sherry stored on his phone, her radiant grin on their first date, the tears of joy on their wedding day, the tender moment they'd captured upon learning she was expecting. He studied each friend and family member in the background, half expecting to spot a familiar stranger, someone matching the woman he'd seen at the cemetery, but there was nothing, only the same faces he'd known a lifetime. Inside the shop, the bustle of printers whirring and customers murmuring felt starkly out of place compared to the hush of the graves. Jordan slid into the queue, phone in hand, while the scent of fresh ink mingled with distant chatter. When the clerk called, "Next, please," he stepped forward, voice low as he requested a replacement for the faded memorial photo. "Do you have it selected?" the clerk asked kindly. Jordan hesitated, then handed over a picture from their last beach vacation, Sherry laughing, eyes bright with hope and promise. He moved to the waiting bench, framed print tucked under his arm, and resumed his social media search for any trace of the woman in his memory. With every scroll, the shop's life continued around him, families preserving last images, friends sharing framed remembrances, while he remained lost in a world of what if. Time stretched until the clerk's gentle voice interrupted. "Mr. Williams, your order is ready." Embarrassed, Jordan approached the counter. The new photo gleamed under fluorescent lights, crisp, vivid, every detail restored. He offered a small, grateful smile. "It's perfect," he told the clerk. As he turned to leave, a woman entered the shop, similar height, similar hair color to Sherry, and for a heartbeat, his hopes soared. But she veered down another aisle, her features plain and different. Jordan shook his head, chiding himself. He tucked the framed photo securely under his arm, heart both lighter and heavier. lighter that he could honor Sherry's memory properly, heavier with the stubborn questions that remained unanswered. Back at the cemetery, the air had warmed slightly, and more visitors had arrived, clusters of mourners moving between plots in quiet procession. Jordan parked and walked straight to Sherry's grave, carrying the new image like a treasure. Kneeling once more, he removed the old, weathered photo and set the fresh portrait into its frame. The colors, Sherry's smile, the glint of sunlight on her hair, felt like a beacon in his world still darkened by loss. He lingered there, listening to the soft rustle of leaves and the distant murmur of other services, reminding him that grief was a shared burden, a universal rhythm of life and death. Jordan pressed his palm against the cool granite and spoke as though she stood before him. "I'll keep coming back every week, I promise, and I'll find the truth, Sherry, about how you died, about what secrets may lie buried as deeply as you are. You deserve answers, and so do I." Standing, he brushed his hands on his jeans, took a final look around the mist-swept cemetery, and headed back to his car. Each step was heavy, but with every visit, with every renewed photo and whispered promise, Jordan felt a flicker of something stronger than grief, determination. He would return, he would remember, and he would uncover whatever dark secrets this place held, no matter how deeply they were hidden. Jordan's hands trembled as he settled into the driver's seat, the infant still cradled gently against his chest. Beads of sweat prickled his forehead. Despite the early hour, the sun was already climbing, its heat seeping through the car windows. He glanced around, half expecting the cemetery gates to reappear or the caretaker to emerge and claim the child, but there was only the silent promise of a road stretching ahead. His heart thundered, a grieving widower with a baby in his arms, a situation he could never have imagined. He fumbled for his phone, thumb hovering over the contacts list. Who could he call? His sister lived across town, but did he dare wake her with such a monstrous revelation? The police station was closer, but would they believe him or accuse him of abandoning a child? He inhaled a shaky breath and drove, hands clenching the wheel as he tried to steady his thoughts. One thing was clear: he couldn't return home. His small apartment, still filled with Sherry's belongings and the empty crib in the corner, would only break him further if he walked through that door. Braking at a red light, Jordan glanced down at the sleeping infant's face, soft, trusting features framed by a curl of golden hair, eyelashes resting on rosy cheeks. He brushed a fingertip against that tiny chin dimple and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness. Whoever had left this child at his wife's grave had entrusted him with an impossible responsibility, and, irrational though it seemed, Jordan felt chosen. He swallowed hard, and when the light turned green, navigated toward the nearest hospital emergency entrance. Every second the baby slept, a blessing, Jordan told himself. It gave him a moment's peace amid the torrent of questions. How long had the child lain alone atop Sherry's grave before he'd discovered her? Did the swaddling blanket bear any clues? An embroidered name? A tag? A note tucked inside? Jordan found himself glancing down at the soft fabric, wishing desperately that someone, somewhere, had left even the tiniest hint. Pulling up to the curb, he parked curbside and reached across the seat to unlatch his door. As he stepped out, the infant stirred, blinking up at him with those startling blue eyes. "It's okay, little one," Jordan murmured, voice thick. He hefted the baby in one arm and closed the car door with the other, cradling the child close against the steady thump of his own heart. Inside the hospital lobby, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the faint scent of antiseptic hung in the air. A reception desk stood directly ahead, and a tired-looking nurse glanced up as Jordan approached. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked, eyebrows knitting in concern as she noticed the infant. Jordan swallowed. "I need help," he said, voice unsteady. "I found this baby at the cemetery, on my wife's grave." He held out the child gently. The nurse's eyes widened, and she set aside her paperwork, rising from behind the desk. "Come with me," she said briskly, motioning toward a private examination room. As they walked, Jordan's mind raced. The nurse introduced herself as Marisol and led him down a corridor lined with doors marked Pediatric Assessment and Social Services. She asked him to fill out a brief intake form, name, contact information, any details about how he'd found the infant. Jordan scribbled with shaking fingers, Sherry L. Williams Cemetery, hoping it made sense to someone. Once inside the small room, Nurse Marisol wrapped her arm around his shoulder while another staff member, Dr. Patel, knelt beside the child's portable bassinet. She spoke softly to the infant, peeling back the swaddling blanket to examine the baby's hands and feet, checking vital signs with practiced efficiency. Jordan hovered nearby, unable to tear his gaze away from the fragile form. "He's healthy," Dr. Patel announced after a moment, voice warm. "No signs of distress, well-nourished, about 4 weeks old." She traded a look with Nurse Marisol. No identification, no wristband or tag. Jordan felt his chest tighten. "Is there anything else you can tell me?" he asked, voice small. Dr. Patel shook her head gently. "Not without records or a statement from whoever brought him in. We'll need Child Protective Services to take over now. They'll investigate and do everything they can to locate the parents." Jordan's breath caught. "But I found him." He glanced at the infant, who yawned and curled into Dr. Patel. "I'm his guardian, at least for now." The doctor offered him a sympathetic look. "We'll register you as the person who turned him in, Mr. Williams. CPS will contact you for any follow-up. Thank you for bringing him in safely." Jordan nodded numbly, suddenly exhausted. He watched as the baby was gently lifted onto a padded scale, measured and weighed, then swaddled into a crisp new blanket. The medical team's calm, routine professionalism stood in stark contrast to the surreal whirlpool of his emotions, shock, protectiveness, and an unshakable sense of wonder at the impossible twist fate had thrown him. As Nurse Marisol led him back to the lobby and handed him a cup of water, Jordan glanced again at the infant's tiny profile, as serene and innocent as a sleeping angel. He pressed his fingertips to his lips, pressing a kiss into the air above the child's brow. "I'll do everything I can to find where you belong," he whispered. Outside, the sun was climbing higher, promising a new day, and with it, an uncertain journey to uncover the truth behind that miraculous child at his wife's grave. Jordan stole one last longing glance at Sherry's grave before sliding behind the wheel, the infant still swaddled against his chest. As he merged onto the main road, the weight of the morning's revelations settled around him like a shroud. The unearthly appearance of a baby atop his wife's resting place, the uncanny echoes of Sherry's own features in that tiny face, and now the urgent need to protect this child. He forced himself to breathe deeply, hands firm on the steering wheel, and silently vowed that, no matter how impossible it seemed, he would keep this baby safe. Each mile toward Tommy's clinic felt like wading through molasses. The sun rose higher, its warmth pressuring against the car's windows, but Jordan barely noticed the heat, eyes locked on the infant whose soft breathing lulled him into a fragile calm. How could a child born the very month Sherry should have delivered appear here at her grave? He replayed every memory of her final days, her unblemished smile despite morning sickness, the vivid plans they made for the nursery, and wondered if forces beyond his understanding were at play, granting him a miracle or plunging him into deeper confusion. At last, the familiar sign for Greenfield Medical Clinic appeared, a modest brick building tucked between a pharmacy and a grocery store. Jordan's pulse quickened. Tommy wasn't just his childhood friend. He was the community's trusted family doctor, a man whose steady hands had delivered more babies than Jordan could count. If anyone could make sense of this living paradox, it was Tommy. Jordan skidded into a parking spot and climbed out, cradling the baby carefully as he hurried to the clinic's side entrance. Inside, the The cool hush of air conditioning washed over him, followed by startled glances from the receptionist, Lisa. Her professional mask slipped for an instant when she saw the infant. "Jordan? What on earth?" she began, eyes wide with concern. He leaned forward, voice urgent. "It's an emergency. I need to see Tommy now." She disappeared for only seconds before returning to guide him down the hall. Every step rang loud in Jordan's ears as he pushed open Tommy's office door. Tommy looked up from a stack of patient files, brow creasing at the sight of his friend clutching the baby. "Jordan, you look like you've seen a ghost. What's going on?" Relief and panic collided in Jordan's chest. He held out the child. I found him at Sherry's grave," he stammered, "on her headstone. Tommy, this can't be real, but look at him. Sherry's eyes, her hair, and he's exactly the age she should have been." The doctor ran a hand through his hair, eyes darting between Jordan's face and the infant's pale curls. "Sit down," Tommy said, voice low. He closed the door behind them and gestured to the small love seat. Jordan settled onto its edge, the baby tucked safely in his arms. Tommy retrieved gloves and a small cheek swab kit from his desk drawer. "Jordan, you're still grieving," he began gently. "But you know these records. Sherry died before she could deliver. Her file is sealed." Jordan nodded, tears glinting in his eyes. "I know, but I have to know. Could there be some mistake? A hidden twin? Something the hospital overlooked?" He swallowed hard. "Can you do a DNA test?" Tommy froze. He was bound by medical ethics, hospital regulations, and the law, yet he saw the desperation in Jordan's gaze and knew that, beneath the professional duty, he owed his friend a measure of compassion. After a tense moment, he exhaled and met Jordan's eyes. "If anyone finds out, there'll be consequences, for both of us. No one can know about this. The test results would be off the record, informal, with no legal standing. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed?" Jordan's nod was fervent, head bobbing. "Please, I need the truth before I can face anything else." Tommy set to work with methodical care, a quick cheek swab from Jordan, a second from the baby, each one sealed and labeled. He whispered instructions to Leanna, his wife, and the clinic's nurse, who stepped in to soothe the infant with gentle coos. As the hours ticked by, Jordan paced outside the office, tossing steps like stones across a pond of doubt. What if the result was negative? Who was this miracle child? And if positive, what would that mean for his shattered heart? Finally, Tommy emerged, face grave beneath the clinic's pale fluorescent lights. Jordan halted his pacing instantly. "Jordan," Tommy said, voice barely above a whisper, "I ran it through a private lab I trust. The probability is overwhelming. You are this baby's father." The words hit Jordan like a thunderclap. His knees buckled and he sank into a chair, the baby's head resting against his chest in perfect peace. A tide of elation, terror, and deep grief washed through him. Joy at finding proof of Sherry's legacy, fear at the implications of such an impossible truth, and a profound ache for the wife he would never see again. Jordan lifted his gaze to Tommy, eyes wide. "How is this possible? What does it mean?" Tommy shook his head, equally stunned. "I don't know," he admitted, "but whoever left this child at her grave must have believed you'd find him, and believe in a miracle, just as I'm starting to. We'll need to consider every possibility, legal and medical. First, we secure this child's safety. Then, we dig for answers." Cradling the infant close, Jordan felt his grief transform into a resolute calm. "Thank you, Tommy. I don't know where we go from here, but I know I can't turn back." Outside, the summer sun dipped toward afternoon, but inside that small clinic room, a father held his child, and for the first time in a month, felt the faint stirrings of hope. Jordan's shoulders slumped as the detectives departed, file in hand and expressions apologetic but resolute. He sat in the stiff plastic chair, palms pressed flat against his knees, jaw clenched. Everything they said was true on paper. His wife's death certificate, funeral home records, the signed burial permit. But the DNA test, conducted in secret, told a different story. The baby he held in his arms was undeniably his child with Sherry. And that impossible truth demanded answers that no official document could provide. He rose, smoothing the front of his jacket, and headed for the door without a word. In the hallway, the buzz of phones and the murmur of officers felt oppressively normal, as though nothing supernatural had occurred. Jordan forced himself not to look back. If he did, he might see Sherry standing there in the doorway, her eyes bright with that familiar mischief. He slipped out onto the curb, inhaled the late afternoon air, and steered his car back toward home, though home no longer felt like a place of refuge. By the time he reached the quiet street where Sherry's parents lived, dusk was settling in. He parked at the curb and climbed the creaking front steps. Gerald Williams answered the door, face lined with grief and surprise. "Jordan, is everything all right?" His father-in-law's voice trembled with genuine concern. Jordan forced a smile that felt more like a grimace. "I need to see you, your files, all of them. Hospital records, autopsy report, funeral home documentation. Now." Gerald paled, sputtering something about confidentiality and respect for Sherry's memory. Jordan cut him off. "I found a baby at her grave today. DNA proves it's mine and hers. I need to know if she really died." Inside, papers rustled as Gerald rushed to his study. He offered Jordan a stack of folders: Sherry's prenatal charts, physician's notes, the coroner's report, even photographs from the autopsy. Jordan's heart pounded as he thumbed through them. Every signature was genuine, every stamp official, but how could that square with the life he'd held in his arms? He examined the coroner's notes: time of death, cause of demise listed as pulmonary embolism, fetus noted as non-viable. Nothing here suggested Sherry had delivered or even survived the ordeal. Yet that baby, faintly rose-scented from the swaddle, had eyes just like Sherry's. "Where did you get this?" Gerald asked, voice low. Jordan looked up, meeting his father-in-law's haunted gaze. "I found him on her headstone. I buried her myself." The older man's face crumpled. For a moment it seemed he might dispense some hidden truth, something about a hush-hush procedure or a secret twin, but instead he simply shook his head. I'm sorry, Jordan. This is above my pay grade." He sank into his chair, head in hands. Jordan clenched his fists. He couldn't give up, not when hope hovered so close. He gathered the files and left without another word, stepping back into the cooling evening. His car smelled faintly of funeral home lilies, a reminder of how fresh that world still was to him. He drove instead to the Greenfield Funeral Parlor, a place he had avoided since Sherry's service. The neon sign flickered as he entered, and Mrs. Delgado, the director, looked up from her desk with polite sorrow. "Jordan," she said softly, "I'm so sorry for your loss." He slammed the coroner's report and birth records onto her desk. "These papers say Sherry never gave birth, but I'm holding her child. I want to exhume her casket. I want a second autopsy." Mrs. Delgado's eyes widened behind her spectacles. "Exhume? Mr. Williams, that's unusual and costly. Plus, it requires court approval." Jordan's voice dropped to a steely whisper. "I'll pay anything. I'll do whatever it takes. I need the truth." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I'll need a court order, and at least 2 witnesses. It could take weeks." Jordan's mind churned. Weeks. More time for the baby to slip out of official view. "Do it," he said, handing her a check. "And tell the coroner I'll need her longest stored tissues for retesting." Dusk deepened into night as Jordan finally returned home, a small apartment now ominously empty without Sherry. He placed the coroner's files atop the kitchen table, then blinked against the dark. The crib in the corner beckoned, and he realized he still had nowhere to keep the baby tonight. He called Leanna, voice thick with exhaustion. Within minutes, she arrived with a small bassinet and fresh blankets from the clinic. Together, they warmed formula and prepared a place for the infant. As Jordan fed him, the boy's eyes fluttered closed, exhaustion winning over curiosity. Jordan cradled him close, rocking gently. "I don't know what's real, little one," he murmured, voice hoarse, "but I'll find out. I promise you that." Dawn would bring exhumation lawyers, coroner's deputies, and perhaps answers, or more questions. Yet in that quiet hour before sleep, Jordan allowed himself one moment of peace, the steady rhythm of the baby's breathing, a reminder that miracles, real or not, sometimes arrive precisely when they're needed most. Jordan felt the weight of every doubt in the detective's eyes as he stood and excused himself. Their polite skepticism stung worse than outright disbelief, and he knew he'd find no help in that precinct. Clutching the steering wheel, he drove with laser focus back toward Tommy's clinic, desperate for any clue that might make sense of the impossible. When Leanna answered his knock, she looked up from the infant's car seat, concern softening her features. "How did it go?" she asked gently, rocking the baby in her arms. Jordan ran a hand through his hair. "They only saw a grieving husband," he said, voice tight. "Officially, Sherry is dead and buried, but we both know that can't be true." Leanna's eyes filled with sympathy. "What will you do now?" "I'm going back to the cemetery," Jordan replied, resolve hardening. "If there's any place left with secrets, it's there. Maybe I can find someone, another caretaker, a delivery person, anyone who might have seen something." Leanna nodded and swiftly packed a bag. Formula, diapers, spare clothes, swaddles, all the supplies a newborn could need. "Take this," she said, handing him the bag. "And please be careful. There's no car seat." Jordan accepted it gratefully. "Thank you," he murmured, eyes glinting with gratitude. After a quick tutorial on feeding and changing, he slipped out into the afternoon sun, baby and bag in arm. By the time he reached the cemetery, the heat was blazing overhead, and the grounds lay empty again, the hush broken only by distant birdsong. He crossed the lawn to Sherry's grave, weaving through headstones until he reached her marker and felt the baby fuss against his chest. Remembering Leanna's instructions, Jordan used the tombstone's flat surface as a makeshift table, mixed a bottle of formula, and coaxed the infant's tiny mouth to the nipple. The cries faded to contented suckles as he held the child close, eyes scanning for any passerby. When the bottle was empty, Jordan checked the diaper, and a folded scrap of paper fluttered to the ground. He picked it up, heart pounding. On the back of a laundromat loyalty card, in Sherry's characteristic looping handwriting, was a simple apology. "I'm so sorry for all of this. Please take care of him." Jordan's breath caught. Flipping the card over, he saw the laundromat's address, just across the border in North Carolina, not far from her parents' home. Sherry's handwriting, an address she would know by heart. His mind raced. Was she alive? Had she faked everything and left clues only he would follow? He needed help, someone who could navigate this twisted trail, and there was only one person he trusted, his mother. Hands trembling, Jordan dialed. "Mom," he blurted the moment she answered, voice thick with urgency. "Something impossible has happened. I found a baby at Sherry's grave. DNA proves it's ours. Now I have this note. I don't know what to do." On the other end, Sharon Williams was silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, "Oh, Jordan, I'm headed to North Carolina," he said, breathing heavily. "I have to find her. But I can't do this alone." "Say no more," his mother replied. "Give me 15 minutes. I'll pack an overnight bag. I'll meet you at your house." 15 minutes later, Sharon stood on Jordan's front porch, holding a small duffel bag and wearing a look of resolute love. As he helped her in, She gasped softly at the sight of her grandson, swaddled in Leanna's blanket. "He looks just like her," she whispered, fingertips brushing the baby's cheek. Jordan managed a weary smile. "It's a lot," he admitted, "but we'll figure it out. Together." Sharon squeezed his hand. "We will. You're not alone." With renewed determination, Jordan settled behind the wheel, Sharon at his side, their son secured in the back seat. The sky over Charlotte Highway deepened to dusky pink as they headed south. Each passing mile brought them closer to the laundromat's neon sign, and Jordan prayed to whatever truth lay waiting: a return from the dead, a secret plan, or an answer that would finally free him to love his wife's child without the shadow of doubt. No matter what they found in North Carolina, Jordan knew one thing for certain. He would not stop until he untangled every lie and held Sherry's mystery in his hands. Jordan squared his shoulders and refused to step back in the face of Gerald's snarled denial. The mansion's grand doors yawned behind him, but none of its opulence mattered now. In his arms, the baby stirred, and Jordan's every instinct, from grief to fierce protectiveness, demanded the truth. "Call her what you will," Jordan said quietly, voice low but steel cold. "This child is my son. I found him swaddled on Sherry's grave. I have the DNA test results. I have her words on this card." He held it up, the laundromat logo catching the light, written in her hand. "You can't pretend he doesn't exist." Gerald's jaw tightened, his expensive cufflinks gleaming in the afternoon sun. Thelma took a hesitant step forward, her lips trembling. "Jordan, please," she began, voice breaking. "You don't understand." "What I understand," Jordan cut in, "is that you refuse to let me say goodbye." He glanced at Thelma as though seeing her for the first time. "You sealed her casket without asking me. You told lies to keep me away." Thelma's eyes filled with tears. She swallowed hard, then closed her mouth bravely. Gerald's voice rose over hers. "It was for her own good, hers and yours." His words spat in the air between them, rancid with something like hatred. Jordan felt his pulse thunder. "For my good? For Sherry's? Or for your reputation? You thought it better for the Williams name that she die quietly, that her pregnancy never become a scandal." He took a step back, lowering the baby into the crook of his arm. "She was carrying this child, your grandchild, when she died." Gerald's facade cracked. His voice sank to a dangerous whisper. She wasn't supposed to keep it." Thelma gasped. "George!" "No," Gerald said, turning on Thelma. "She knew what she'd done. She'd already gone behind my back once. She ran off to North Carolina, said she needed to clear her head. When she came back," his eyes flickered to Jordan's face, haunted. "She was different. He pressed a trembling finger to his temple, lowering his head. Thelma caught Jordan's gaze. She wanted to give him up," she choked out, hand pressed to her heart. "She was ashamed. She was afraid, so afraid you'd never forgive her, never want her back. And Gerald, he was furious. He forced her to sign papers. She begged us to let her keep him. Her voice cracked like glass. She wiped her eyes. We told her she could see him later, after things settled." Jordan stifled a sob, rage and sorrow tangling in his chest. "You lied to her. You lied to me, and you stole my son." Thelma stumbled forward, hands outstretched. "He was supposed to be adopted. We arranged for a couple in Carolina. Good people, far from here. Sherry knew. She signed the papers." Her voice dropped to a whisper. But then she changed her mind. She wrote that note. She wanted to raise him herself. She couldn't get back in time. By then, the adoption was final." Tears rolled down her cheeks, and Gerald stood rigid behind her, eyes closed. Jordan's world felt as though it were imploding. He looked down at his son, tiny fists balled around his swaddle, Everything he had believed, Sherry's death, the funeral's finality, was unraveling here, on these marble steps, under this mid-afternoon sun. He drew in a ragged breath and met Gerald's eyes. "Where is she now? If she's alive, bring her here." His voice echoed off the stone columns. Gerald's jaw dropped, disbelief warring with shame. She didn't want you to find her. She thought maybe it would be better if she disappeared. Thelma began to sob, shoulders shaking. "She's in Carolina. She rented a room by that laundromat. She said she needed a fresh start for the baby." Jordan's heart lurched. "Where?" Gerald swallowed, then gave a trembling address. "A sleepy stretch of road in Wilmington, North Carolina. A cheap motel behind a strip mall." Jordan's mind raced. If he drove straight there, 6 hours on the interstate, he could confront her, demand her truth, see his wife, and reclaim his son's future. He looked at his mother, whose face was grim with determination. She nodded sharply. "We leave now." Jordan stepped back, adjusting the baby in his arms, who stirred and blinked up at him with those impossibly familiar eyes. Then he turned his gaze back to Thelma and Gerald, his voice cold but final. "You will never keep us apart again. I will not rest until Sherry is safe and our son is mine to raise." Gerald lowered his head, defeated. Thelma's tears soaked her cheeks as Jordan climbed into the car, Sharon at his side and his son nestled between them in a proper car seat, purchased at the last exit, strapped in with shaking hands. As the gates closed behind them, Jordan pressed the accelerator. The mansion's silhouette receded in the rearview mirror, its secrets laid bare in that moment of confession. Ahead lay the open highway, the promise of answers, and the chance to heal the fractures of a family torn apart by fear and lies. And all Jordan could think was this: whatever waited in Wilmington, he would face it, and he would bring his family home. Jordan's chest heaved as the guards' firm grips dragged him off balance, their arms like iron locks around his shoulders. He staggered, heart pounding in his ears louder than the baby's wails fading behind him. For a moment, time stretched taut, Gerald looming in the doorway, Thelma's tear-streaked face half hidden behind his broad frame, Sherry's terrified eyes peering out from behind a heavy oak door. "You should have left," Gerald said, his voice low and controlled, "and never looked back." The words were a venomous whisper that cut through Jordan's rage and fear. But Jordan's grief had forged him into something sharper than sorrow now. He twisted in the guard's hold, adrenaline surging, and caught Gerald's gaze with steel in his own. "You lied to us," he spat, voice cracking against the marble's chill. "You stole my wife. You stole my son." "I'm not finished." A guard jerked him upright again, cuffing his arms behind his back. The click of metal was a cruel punctuation to Gerald's triumph. In that instant, Jordan realized he was alone in the heart of a fortress built on lies. Behind him, footsteps thundered down the hallway. Sharon's panicked scream echoed through the grand foyer. "Jordan!" His mother's voice was a lightning strike in his ears, reminding him of the child waiting in the car, the DNA proof, the note scrawled by Sherry's own hand. He turned his head, seeing her standing at the threshold, fear and fury warring in her eyes. The baby, bundled in Leanna swaddle, was cradled desperately in her arms. For a moment, their eyes met, and something passed between them, a promise that they would not abandon each other, no matter the cost. Then Gerald gave a curt nod, and 2 more guards swept in from either side, blocking Jordan's view of the bedroom door that had swallowed Sherry. One guard yanked him forward, another pressed a hand over his mouth to muffle his protests. His boots scraped against the polished stone floor as they marched him through the cavernous halls, the echoes of his footsteps swallowed by the mansion's oppressive grandeur. Paintings of stern ancestors seemed to watch them pass, eyes cold and disapproving. They threw him into a windowless study at the end of a long corridor, walls lined with leather-bound volumes, their spines gilded but dusty. A single lamp cast harsh shadows across the desk, where civil-sounding documents lay neatly piled, waiting to legitimize every betrayal. One guard shoved Jordan into a high-backed chair, pulling a rough-hewn blindfold over his eyes. Jordan's breath caught at the sudden darkness, and every instinct screamed to resist. But he also knew that if he fought too hard right now, they might hurt Sherry, or worse, hurt the baby. His fists clenched on the arms of the chair. "You'll pay for this," he murmured into the void, voice low but fierce. "I will get her back. I will get our son back." Years of love, weeks of grief, and the raw miracle of finding that baby had all led to this moment. Nothing would stand between him and the truth, not the Williams family's secrets, not their wealth or influence. Somewhere beyond the door, muffled sobs told him that Sharon and the baby had escaped. His heart leapt at the thought. If they were free, then he still had hope. If they were safe, he could find his way out. Perhaps by following the sounds of their retreat, perhaps by forcing his way through the door. He pressed his forehead against the blindfold, centering himself on that single truth. His family was out there, relying on him to survive this. Footsteps approached, the blindfold was yanked away, and the study door swung open. Gerald stood there, his posture regal, face pallid, but eyes burning with something that might have been guilt. Behind him, Sherry appeared, draped in a simple blouse and worn jeans, her face pale but determined. She held a second note in her trembling hand, this one addressed to Jordan. "He demanded I sign it," she whispered, voice quavering. "But I refused. He said I was betraying the family. He said—" Her words caught in a sob, and Gerald made a swift motion, as though to silence her. But Jordan had seen enough. He lunged forward, ignoring the chairs clattering to the floor, and caught Sherry's arms in a fierce embrace. "Thank God," he gasped, tears springing unbidden. "Thank God you're alive." Gerald advanced, but Jordan planted a hand on Sherry's back, protective as a shield. "Stay back," he warned, voice low but unwavering. "We're leaving. Right now." The mansion seemed to shudder at the command. For a long moment, none of them moved. Then Gerald let out a bitter laugh and retreated. "You'll regret this," he hissed, but his voice lacked conviction. Jordan released Sherry's arms and turned to her. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice gentle. She nodded, tears streaking her cheeks, and placed the note in his hand. "I couldn't lose both of you. I'm so sorry. I hid here until I could be sure it was safe. They'll try to stop you. Go to the highway. Mom and baby will meet you at the diner off exit 42. I love you, always." Outside, somewhere distant, a car engine idled. Jordan retrieved his blindfold-dulled wits, glanced at Gerald, his enemy and his father-in-law, and let Sherry lean on him as they strode past the silent guards. Each step rang like a promise. They would escape this house of lies, reunite the family, and reclaim the life they had been cheated of. In the hallway, Jordan whispered to Sherry, voice warm despite the chill, "We're coming home." And with that, he led her out the front door into the fading afternoon light, every fear replaced by a fierce, unbreakable resolve to protect their son and each other, no matter what lay ahead. The grand foyer fell silent save for the steady clip of handcuffs closing around Gerald's wrists. His security guards, faces cast down in shame, surrendered their weapons to the nearest officer, while Thelma, still trembling, stood before Jordan and Sherry, her eyes brimming with sorrow and relief. Sherry, cheeks streaked with tears, stepped forward and wrapped her trembling arms around Jordan's waist. The baby nestled between them, cooing softly, as if sensing at last the safety of his true family. "I'm so proud of you," Jordan whispered into her hair, voice thick. "You were brilliant." Detective Harris, clipboard in hand, moved to Thelma's side. "Ma'am, we'll need your full statement," he said gently, and Thelma nodded, swallowing hard. As she recounted Gerald's deceptions, The falsified death certificate, the bribed doctors, the stolen newborn. Officers cataloged every detail. Each new revelation drove another nail into the coffin of Gerald's lies. Behind them, a paramedic gently examined Jordan's bruises while Sharon knelt to cradle her grandson. "You gave us hope," Sharon murmured to Sherry. "Thank you for bringing him home." Sherry kissed her mother-in-law's hand, gratitude shining in her eyes. Outside, patrol cars lined the circular drive, their lights painting the mansion's facade in urgent red and blue. Journalists clustered at a respectful distance, cameras clicking as officers led Gerald and his guards away. Gerald's glare flashed one last time at Jordan, but it lacked its former cruelty, now reduced to the desperation of a man undone. In the fading afternoon light, Jordan unfastened the baby from Sharon's arms and held him aloft, voice bright with triumph. "This is our son, William Jordan Williams," he announced, naming the child for both of them. The baby gurgled in response, tiny fists waving as if to accept his future. Sherry stepped beside Jordan, hand in his. Though her face was pale, her smile was radiant. "We're free," she said softly, tears of joy pooling. "Free to be a family." Detective Harris approached and offered Jordan his card. "If you need anything, legal assistance, protective orders, call me. We'll make sure the courts recognize you as your son's father and protect your family from any further harm." Jordan accepted the card with a nod, relief and gratitude warming him from the inside out. As the officers guided Sherry to the front steps to give her official statement, Jordan gathered his family close, a ring of solidarity against a world that had tried to tear them apart. Above them, the mansion's windows reflected the last golden rays of the sun, as if blessing their new beginning. Together, they turned to walk out into the evening air. Jordan, Sherry, their newborn son, and Sharon at their side. Behind them, the gates to the past clanged shut for good. Ahead lay the open road home. And for the first time in far too long, Jordan's heart was full of hope. That night, for the first time in more than a month, Jordan, Sherry, and baby Jerry slept under one roof without fear. In the small Virginia home they had once shared, the silence felt warm rather than hollow. Morning light filtered through sheer curtains as Sherry quietly rose, carrying her son into the kitchen. Jordan joined her, still in clothes from the long drive, and together they watched Jerry coo at the world for the very first time in their own home. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft rustle of pages as Sharon settled at the table with local newspapers detailing Gerald Williams's arrest. Over breakfast, Sherry traced tiny circles on Jerry's swaddled blanket. "He's home," she whispered, eyes bright. "We're really home." Jordan reached across, taking her hand. "And this time, we belong together, always." Later that morning, the local courthouse buzzed with activity as Detective Harris guided them to a quiet meeting room. The corrupt hospital administrators and funeral home director had already agreed to testify. Jordan and Sherry gave their statements side by side, their voices steady now that the truth was unshakable. Outside, Sharon and Thelma waited, sharing a hopeful glance. The bridge between them had begun to hold. By midday, paperwork was signed recognizing Jordan as Jerry's legal father and Sherry as his mother. The judge, moved by their ordeal, fast-tracked a protective order barring Gerald Williams from any contact and ordered a formal investigation into the bribed officials. When they emerged, the afternoon sun was warm on their faces. Thelma fell to her knees before Jerry, presenting him with a tiny handmade quilt. "For my grandson," she said, voice catching. Sherry knelt beside her mother, folding her into an embrace that spoke of forgiveness earned and trust rebuilt. As the family piled into Jordan's car, ready to return across state lines to the life they nearly lost, Sherry held Jerry up so he could wave goodbye to the courthouse steps. Jordan eased the car into traffic, Sharon riding shotgun, Thelma in back beside Jerry's car seat. They passed the cemetery gates, silent now, save for a lone headstone marked Sherry L. Williams. Jordan slowed, and Sherry reached out to touch his hand. "We'll come back," she said, voice firm, "to plant spring flowers and to honor how far we've come." With that promise, they drove on toward home, toward healing, toward bright mornings filled with laughter, and toward the future their son had already begun to shape with each tiny heartbeat against Sherry's. Together, they were whole again.